So for the first time in history, the NAACP is not going to be inviting a sitting president to their convention because they say that Donald Trump has completely undermined their mission. And I say to that, how could you ever disagree with them? Donald Trump is also the first American president to be put on a watch list by a civil rights group who was looking to see and track and keep count of all the civil rights that Donald Trump has been taken away. And I really wanted to just sit here and talk for a minute about the damage that he has done to all of this and to the type of people who he has propped up and gave a voice to. You know, one of the people that he considers to be a golden boy and just lets have the microphone any chance he gets is Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk has been a guy who has been very outspoken, saying that the Civil Rights Act was a mistake, saying that Martin Luther King was not a good guy. He has went out of his way to demonize civil rights and demonize people like Martin Luther King to the point that when he visited Donald Trump, they removed a bust of Martin Luther King, I guess so Charlie Kirk wouldn't be offended. We have never in our lifetime seen a president who has targeted civil rights the way that Donald Trump has. He sent in the National Guard on civil rights protesters. And that's the first time that the National Guard had been sent in since 1965, when LBJ sent in the Guard to Alabama to protect civil rights protesters. So that's truly how far that we've fallen. And I always say this in my videos, and I hope people can understand that I'm really, I'm coming from the best of intentions when I say this. I'm willing to sit here and admit openly that I was ignorant, and I'm willing to sit here and admit openly that I was naive and that I fully didn't get it. But there was a window of time when I was growing up, and my memory picks up in the mid-'80s. I was born in 80, and, my memory kind of kicks in around 84 or 85 is where my memory picks up. My first memories was seeing Ronald Reagan on TV as the president. The first news story that I ever remember seeing was the Challenger explosion in 86. That's the first major news story that I remember standing in front of the TV and watching as a kid. But as I grew up and we came on up into the 90s, I really thought that we were moving past racism. I thought that we were going to end up putting it to bed. If you'd asked me in 1995 where we would be on race relations in 2025, I would have thought we would have already put racism in the dustbin of history. And if you'd have told me in 1995 that in 2025 the NAACP wouldn't be inviting a sitting president to their convention because they felt like they undermined their mission, I would say there's no way that could ever happen. But unfortunately, folks, here we are. And that is exactly what happens when you allow someone to go out there and amplify the absolute worst of voices, the absolute most hateful of voices. And we have saw our country devolve. We have saw progress frowned upon. We have saw progress demonized. They're constantly demonizing it, calling it woke, and finding every way they can to stop that progress. Because at the end of the day, the progress is what truly terrifies them. It's what scares them. They don't ever want to see this country make any progress. They don't ever want to see us move forward. And so that's why they're kicking and screaming so hard against it. But my good buddy, I follow him over on TikTok, is mainly where his content is. His name's Superman Todd. And if you've never followed his content, I highly recommend you check it out. He and I talks back and forth. We communicate in voice messages every day. I always look forward to my daily voice message exchange because we're just talking about, everything that's going on in the world. But he made a really excellent point, and he actually did a video on this that you could check out. He was talking about the show All in the Family. And pretty sure it's like free on the Tubi app. You can sit and watch the old episodes of All in the Family, which I want to say started around 1971 or 2 is when it ran. I don't remember how many seasons there were of it, but it ran in the 1970s. And back in the 1970s, that show was one of the most popular shows in America. It actually came on with a warning label at first. But what a lot of people today, when they go back and talk about that show, don't fully understand about it, is that the show was satire, which is the use of humor, irony, and exaggeration to expose the stupidity of someone's beliefs. And Todd brought across the point that Archie Bunker, back in those days, in the 1970s, Archie Bunker was the butt of all the jokes. His ridiculous hot takes on things were laughed at and ridiculed because of how over-the-top ridiculous they are. And now, Archie Bunker is Donald Trump's cabinet. The Archie Bunker character, the Archie Bunker character, who was the butt of all jokes in the 1970s, is now pretty much the President of the United States, and it's every member of his cabinet. They've absolutely validated Archie Bunker. And the funny thing is, I get a kick out of the people who will say this and they completely miss the point when they say it. Whenever I hear someone make this quote, I know that they completely miss the entire point. They will say, oh man, Archie Bunker could never be made today, man. These liberals, these softies, these snowflakes out here, they could never handle All in the Family if it came out today. They don't understand that Carol O'Connor, who was portraying Archie Bunker, was one of the most progressive, hippie, liberal people that there ever was. Okay, so was Rob Reiner, who was playing Meathead, who was playing, his son-in-law he always argued with. But Carol O'Connor played that part to expose the stupidity of Archie Bunker and his hot takes and his beliefs. If All in the Family was made today, in today's era, and let's say Alec Baldwin was Archie Bunker, MAGA would absolutely hate and despise him, and Donald Trump would be calling for the show to be canceled because what a lot of people fail to realize is Richard Nixon. There's actually clips on YouTube, you can find it, of Richard Nixon talking about Archie Bunker on a recording. And it's very hard to hear. You have to really zero in and listen to it. If you can find a version that brings the text up on the screen, it really will help you with it. But Archie Bunker is talking about that show and how mad he is because it's making people like him look stupid. But in the 1970s, people were making progress. They were working toward it anyway. They were trying to understand things, and they were using satirical TV shows. And people were out there writing protest music to raise awareness on the issues at hand and to expose the stupidity of bigotry and the stupidity of racism and to expose just how evil and twisted and sick that it all is. And then over time, we just went the opposite way. And when we elected Donald Trump, we basically just pulled off the scab, off the wound that people like me thought was getting better. I thought that we were going to be healed up by now. I thought that we would have moved past it by now. But we're still here. We're still right here in the same, in some ways in a worse boat, because we thought for a minute that we were going to put it away. Now, I have talked to so many black people who have told me, oh, it was always there. It never went away. It never stopped. It never slowed down. You just thought that it did for a moment in time. You felt that way, but it never happened. We seen it the entire time. We realized the entire time that the issues was still there, that the problems was still there. And to that I say, I apologize for not seeing through it and for thinking that we were getting better. And I know there's going to be some trolls who say, he's got a bunch of white guilt. No, I don't have white guilt. I just know assholes when I see it, and I know wrong when I see it. I know the difference between right and wrong. And the fact that we have devolved this far, that now you would have the NAACP saying, no, we don't want the president here because he's undermined our mission. Well, you cannot argue with him because he absolutely has. He's done more damage to civil rights than any president I can think of, especially in modern time. He has absolutely worked to unravel everything that everyone fought for and everyone put in place. And they've went out of their way to demonize and vilify it, and went out of their way to amplify the absolute worst of voices. When I was growing up, you would still, from time to time, you would see the Ku Klux Klan march in this part of the world. From time to time, you would see it. But you would also have a whole bunch of people sitting back talking about how ridiculous it was, talking about how wrong it was, and calling it out. Nowadays, they just amplify those kind of voices. Nowadays, they normalize and same-wash those type of voices. And that's why that I don't see the need to sit down with those kind of people, because I don't want to ever normalize or same-wash them or make them feel like that they have an argument here. They don't. They're flat out fucking wrong and should be called out as such. You can't sit back and be okay with this stuff and think that it's all going to get better, because it's not going to be. And you can't sit back and turn over the microphone to those kind of people and expect different results. It's not going to happen. We're seeing people's names be removed. We're seeing things being taken down like we've never seen before. And they're doing it, and they're flexing, and they're happy about it. They're happy about it. And it's wrong. It's straight up wrong. And we need to call it out as such. And we need to make it to where Archie Bunker is the butt of all jokes again. That's where it needs to go. It needs to go back to that. If you want to talk about the pendulum swinging, well, the pendulum swung, and people in the 70s was seeing, hey, we can make these satirical shows to expose the stupidity of this belief system. But the pendulum swung back to where that character that was the butt of all jokes is now in charge of our government. We're going to have to swing it back to where the Archie Bunkers of the world are the butt of the joke, and no one takes them seriously. And that's why that I frowned upon Gavin Newsom sitting down with Charlie Kirk, because I saw him explaining, I believe it was to David Packman, I'm pretty sure. Might have been Brian Tyler Cohen. It was one of the two. I don't want to get it wrong. It was one of those two he was talking with, and he said that, he wasn't a confrontational guy, and that he wanted to hear everybody out and hear what they had to say, and he wanted to, they won the election, so, you have to listen to them. And, I appreciate Gavin Newsom for having an open mind and being willing to listen to somebody, but my argument would be, and I would say this to his face, he sat there and let them talk and agreed with them for the most part and just shook his head in agreement. And to the people sitting back on the fence watching that, they saw him doing that with a guy who said Martin Luther King was a bad man. They saw him doing that with a guy that said civil rights was a mistake. They saw him doing that with a guy who has painted and vilified DEI and vilified woke and vilified all the progress that we've made. He just sat there and let him say it unchecked. That's the problem I have with it. That's why you will never see me do it, because I don't respect their opinion enough to entertain it and to make it look like it's valid. And because I truly will always believe that Archie Bunker is who should be the butt of all the jokes.